Welcome to all of you, and thanks for coming out. Um, I have known Soraya for well over half her life. She came up through our young birder programs at the American Birding Association. And I have here a copy of the current issue of Birding Magazine. That is a Pinyon Jay on the front cover. And it was, thank you for the heart there, Julia. That was illustrated by Soraya. And we'll be learning how to draw art like this in just a little bit. And this is sort of the Soraya extravaganza. This issue of birding has so much content by Soraya. For example, these beautiful watercolors like this, and an article on the blue crow or the Pinyon Jay. And I just wanted to encourage all of you all to learn more about Soraya's art and storytelling and natural history, and to do so by bopping on over after the presentation. Please do not do this now, but commit it to memory or write it down at aba.org. It is that simple. ABA as in American Birding Association.org. We actually have two features right on our homepage now celebrating Soraya's art and storytelling and natural history and science. And then if you're interested in learning more, lots of other pages about our young birder programs and other ways to get involved in the ABA. So again, on behalf of all my friends at the ABA, thank you all so much for coming out here. I'm going to withdraw into the background now. I'm looking forward to learning how to draw a Pinyon Jay, and I'll turn the proceedings back over to Soraya. Thanks so much for having me, and have a great time, all of you all, learning how to draw a Pinyon Jay.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ted. Thanks for being here. All right, so we'll jump right in and get started because I promise you that an hour and a half of drawing is going to go by so fast. Um, so you'll want your photos that I sent out, and just quick shout out, these photos are we're able to use them with permission from Marissa Pryor-Luthier, and I'll send you her website later. So if you want to check out her photography, you can. And then I'm going to share something here with you real quick on my screen before we get started. Okay, so before we even start drawing, just a few things for everyone to keep in mind. And I like to say this as a reminder in all of my art classes. Um, and it really has to do with the attitude that you take into art making and into drawing, to give yourself permission to make messy mistakes and to know that there's no pressure today to make a masterpiece. So it should be joyful. It should feel like it's all practice and it's low stakes. No one's giving you a grade. No one's judging you. There's no good or bad. So I hope that everyone can sort of brush off any inner critic that you might have and let yourself be experimental and fluid and spontaneous. And above all, give yourself permission to play. So go ahead and pick one of the photos that I sent you. And if you don't have your photos, let me know and I'll drop them in the chat box. So I'm going to start with this one. It's just a single Pinyon Jay. And we'll start off with something called a single line contour drawing. And we're going to do it blind. And to do it blind means you're not allowed to look at your hand. You're only looking at the photo. And some people, to help them do that, they might like to put a piece of paper on top of their hand so they can't see. Or you could draw this way and look at the photo the other way. You can decide. So main rule here is that you can't look at your hand. You can only look at the photo. And the idea is that you're observing the subject more than you are preoccupied with what you're doing with your hand. I'm going to start at the top of the Pinyon Jay, where the beak meets the forehead. And I'm only looking at the photo. I'm not looking at my hand. And if you're not sure how this works, you can watch me first and then jump in when you feel ready. And I'm imagining that there's a little ant walking along the outer edge of the Pinyon Jay or the contour. If you want to think of it as an outline, you can. And every time the contour dips or falls into a valley or a ridge, I'm following that with my hand and recording it. Everybody's blind contour drawing is going to look funny. The purpose is not to create something amazing and spectacular, it's to observe and to fall into that gentle practice of observing. And don't go too fast either. So go slow, painfully slow if you can. This is a great warm-up activity if you're not sure how to get started with your drawing practice and you're having a hard time breaking the ice. You can just crack open your sketchbook and do some blind contour drawings. If you go off the page, that's okay. You just reset your pen anywhere. I'm following along the edge of the needles. And as you draw, you can ask yourself, what are 5 things that I'm observing in this moment that I didn't see at first? And this is blind, so as soon as you catch yourself looking at your hand, lift your eyes back to the photograph. This type of drawing is the basis for which most of the illustrations in the article in birding are based that I drew for that article. So it's a very different way to draw. They weren't blind, of course. This one is blind. And I don't think we have a lot of opportunity in life to slow down like this. And so it can feel really uncomfortable sometimes. Especially if your nervous system is used to living in the fast lane. You might even start to feel a little panicky as you do this exercise. Like you want to go faster, you want to speed things along. You can breathe deep and resist that impulse. I'm in here in the beak and I'm noticing that crook in the lower mandible and the slight downward curve of the upper mandible. Nothing has to match up or meet up. In fact, it probably won't. It's going to look a little bit like a Picasso drawing. You're not worrying about texture or color. It's just the outline. Here I am back at the forehead. I have a blind contour drawing of a Pinyon Jay. And I see your message, Jennifer. I am going to send you the pictures right now in the chat box. If you don't have the reference photos, check the chat box right now. They're coming as a PDF. You should be able to open them on your phone or your computer. Then you can find a new page in your sketchbook or just a new loose leaf page if that's how you're working. And using the same photo, we'll do a single line contour drawing, but this time it's not blind. This time you can look at your hand, but I would encourage you to look at your hand maybe only 20% of the time and keep your eyes on the bird and the photo for 80% of the time or the remainder of that time. The idea being that you spend more time in observation and less time worrying about where your hand is going and getting it right. So it's really the same idea. You can't lift your pen. So it's single line. Your pen stays on the page the whole time. And it's only contour. So you're not going to worry about shadows and shading or texture. If you're wondering which photo I'm using this one of the single Pinyon Jay. You can use whichever one you like. And I'm going to start at the forehead. And this time, since it's not blind, you can control a little more where your pen is going so you won't go off the page, and wings will match up and the beak will match up. But it's still going to be a bit imperfect because it is a single line. And that's okay. This is a messier way to draw. It's a little more playful than drawing from shapes, which I also love doing. And when you get to the needles, you can have a lot of fun going in and out with the needles here. It's okay if they overlap. And you're still going slow, so you don't want to rush. I like to spend a lot of time with the needles, which is kind of interesting because even though the article that I wrote is about Pinyon Jays, I feel like it's equally as much about the pinyon pine and the relationship between jays and pinyon pine. So as you're drawing these needles, don't think it's just a background or just the plant upon which the bird sits. It's also a protagonist in the story. It's also a subject of interest. So you're not lifting your pen. Pen stays in contact with the paper. But if you find yourself cornered and you don't know how to get back to where you want to be, You can either retrace a line you've already drawn or make up a line. So this doesn't have to be strictly from observation. You're the artist here, so you have permission to change things and make choices that differ from what you see. So single line contour drawing is used a lot in drawing classes, especially if the class is based in some kind of Western philosophy of art. And it's usually used as an exercise. However, I find that it works really nice as an illustration in and of itself. It helps me see things a little bit differently and see relationships between things that I didn't see before, or connectivity. And you also see a lot of children draw, not necessarily single line, but definitely contour drawing. And sometimes as we get older, we might hear that that's not the way to draw. You should draw from shapes. It should look realistic. But I often think that kids are onto something. And I learn a lot from watching kids draw. And I used to draw like this as a kid myself. Then I kind of went away from it and did more shape-based drawing. But now I feel I can come back to it with a new perspective. Shoulder. Here's the throat. And don't be afraid to make the beak a little bigger than you think it is. I usually make the beak a little too small and dainty, but Pinyon Jays have these hefty, sharp beaks for prying open pinion cones. Even when the cone is green and sealed shut, they can pry it open, crack it open. Here's an eye. And you can make micro adjustments as you go along. So let's say you don't like the eye placement. Keep your pen with contact on the paper and just redraw on top of it. Same with the forehead here. I don't like how it's not meeting up. No problem. I'm just going to draw right on top. And I feel like I missed some wing back here, so I'm going to go back. Put in a little nostril there. I'm going to draw the inner edge of the white throat patch. And here's the inner edge of the wing. And you decide where to stop. If you want to put more needles in there, if you want to put more cones, all of that's okay. You can take your time. I'll give you a minute to wrap up your single line and then we'll add some things here. So you might be using pen, you might be using pencil even, that's totally okay. Any drawing implement should be fine as long as it doesn't smear with water. So very few pencils are water soluble, even if they're not advertised as such. And if yours is water soluble, you'll find out very soon here. These are Micron pens, and they come in different sizes. So I've been using 0.5, but I also like to use 0.3 and 0.8. And if you like, you can drop in the chat box what kind of pen you're using. Might be fun to see the diversity of supplies we've all chosen to show up with today. You can even do this with just like a household Bic pen, blue or black, anything works really. Oh, we have fountain pen here from Hazel, pencil, Micron. Nice. So if you are using Micron, you can switch to a larger size like 0.8. Oh, Micron brush, nice. Mary's using a Micron brush. And if you don't have a larger size pen, I'll tell you what to do in a minute. Otherwise, you'll switch to a larger size pen, and we're gonna add weight to some of these lines. So right now, all of the lines are of equal value. If we go in and weight some of the lines, it's gonna add just a little bit of interest. And it's also going to help some parts pop forward and push other parts back. So I want to bring focus to the beak and maybe some parts that are in shadow. So I'll go in with my larger size pen and darken that line. If you don't have a larger size pen, you use the same pen as before. Go on top of your lines and push the pen back and forth to make a thicker line. You can do that even if you don't have a larger size pen. You're not going to do this to all your lines, so that's very important. Think sparse and selective. What areas are you pushing forward in space? What areas are you highlighting for the viewer? If you look at your photo now and let your eyes go out of focus or blur your eyes, you can ask yourself, where do you see the darkest shadows of the bird? For me, I see it in the wing pits and the far left side. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to add weight to those areas. I'm not doing any shading yet. I'm just weighting the line. You can also add some weighted lines to the needles in the pine bough, and again, be frugal and sparing with that. So maybe just 6 to 8 lines that you're going to make thicker. You will want to be careful as you make your lines thicker. You're dropping more ink on the page, so if your hand brushes across it, it might smear a little. So you could put a Kleenex or some kind of paper under your hand, or just be extra careful. Luckily, Micron pen dries pretty fast. Okay. So some of us I see are using pencils. You can still weight your lines. You're just basically making some lines thicker while leaving others thin. That way all your line value is not the same. Makes it just a little more interesting. And feel free as we go along to drop questions in the chat box. I'm checking it frequently, so if you need clarification, I'm happy to sprinkle it in. So now we're going to add some hatching. Hatching is a type of texture and shading that you use. It involves parallel lines. And for this, I like to choose either 03 or 05. I'm going to start with 03 and maybe change partway through. So you still want to be sparing with your hatch strokes. Wherever you see shadow or a darker area, you'll go in and add a series of rhythmical parallel lines. I'll start on the left side of the bird, and feel free to watch me first. Everybody's hatch marks will look a little different depending on your aesthetic and how your hand works. Mine tend to be pretty uniform, but it's okay if they're messy or they cross on top of each other. You find what works for you. And you can play around with it too. It's not, doesn't need to be set in stone. You can imagine that this type of drawing is really great to take outside and outdoors. You don't really need that many supplies. You could just have pencil and piece of paper. It's a fast way to draw, so you can sit somewhere and regardless of whether your subject moves or the weather changes, you're usually going to have enough time to complete something. And sometimes texture and value can be created through the same method. So up here you have the ear coverts and some feather texture, but it's also a dark value. So you can use those hatch lines to create both feather texture and darker value. Switching to 05, a thicker pen. There we go. Nice. Sometimes your hatch lines might be long and sometimes they might be short. And you can also turn your paper around. So if you can get at it from a different angle, go ahead and rotate your paper to fit what your hand needs. I'm rotating my hand, but that's just because this is on a camera that needs to stay where it is. But for you, I would say rotate the paper, not your hand. If you choose to fill in the eye, remember to leave a little glimmer, a little white spot. And that's the extent of hatching that I'll do because we are going to add watercolor in a little bit. And if you cover your drawing with hatch marks, you don't leave a lot of space for watercolor to shine through. You want to leave plenty of open white space so you can add color if you're choosing to go that direction. Before we add color, we want this to dry, so we have a little time to do another one. Can pick, you can either stay on this one if you're still working, there's no rush. If you're done, you can pick another picture. I'm partial to this one, the two birds in the snow. So it doesn't matter if it's one bird or two birds or three birds or four, the single line is still the same. They're all going to be connected by one line. And there's no right route. You can start with the wings or the head and move on to any part of the body from there. And you can adjust lines. You just can't erase lines, but you can go back in. And it is totally okay if your birds look a little funky or whimsical. This is all one connected line. And the purpose is not just the drawing itself, but what I'm learning as I draw it. So, what I'm noticing, the muscle memory that I'm building, sort of like an image file that I'm building inside of my mind. What does a Pinyon Jay foot look like? How do the toes sit on the branch? Maybe you want to include some of those primary feathers or the secondaries or the tertials. But we don't have pine needles this time, we have snow and branches, so don't forget to capture some branch. It's always okay if some of your bird goes off the page. In fact, sometimes that's really nice not to have a composition that fits squarely inside of a page but bleeds off, almost like you could imagine the story continues outside the frame of your page. And the more you practice drawing like this, or truthfully any kind of drawing, you'll notice that every time you return to that subject, you understand a little more about the relationships between the body parts or between one bird and another. So give yourself lots of room for that learning process. You don't have to nail it the first time. And I know that some of you in the class have Pinyon Jays at your feeders, more than one person here. And that's really a great opportunity to draw from life if you can. Drawing from photos is awesome, but when you can draw from a bird from life, it sometimes helps your drawing have a little more motion and vibrancy because you're watching things in real time. Okay, now I'm going to go in and add those hatch marks, hatch texture. I see darker around the face, between the eye and the beak. And then coming out behind the eye. Oh, this is a great question from Linda. Does it matter which direction the hatch lines go? Yes and no. So the the situation in which it would matter is if it's doubling as feather texture because feathers have directionality. Just like if you pet a dog, for example, you know that fur goes in a certain direction. And it's the same with birds. Fur or feathers grow with direction. So if you're doing feathers, you want to try to capture also the direction in which they grow from the bird's body. So this is the breast feathers here. So I'm drawing vertical up and down hatch strokes. If your hatch marks only represent shadow, then it doesn't matter. They can go in any direction you want. So for example, if I want to add shadow to this back foot, you pick what's comfortable for your hand and what feels natural as far as where you position your body. And the direction doesn't matter. If I want to add a little shadow here to the wing and it's just shadow, it's not doubling as a feather texture, you can pick that direction. And another texture you can try at home on another drawing is scribble texture. So sometimes people don't like hatching. It's not a way of working that makes sense for them. So another texture you can try is scribble texture, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You just noodle around with your pen and you create little scribbles and layer up value wherever you want it to look darker. And that sort of speaks to one reason that I really love art making. You have so many choices at any given moment, and none of them is necessarily right. You just try all of them over time and you find what works for you, and then also what works for the particular drawing or painting that you're working on. There are no formulas in art. And it's always worth a little experimentation. And I forgot to put in the weighted lines, so you can go back and do that now if you want. Never too late to add in some darker lines here. Going to be upside down for a minute. Remember I said you could turn your page if you need to. So what's interesting about this bird on the left, it's foreshortened. The wings are foreshortened. So the wings are closer to you in space than the head. So I'm going to go in and darken the wings with a heavier line and see if I can push them forward in space. A little bit. And then you can also do that with the bottom part of the tail. I'm adding in more hatch lines to the bird on the left. Remember to be sparing with them. Less is more. So I definitely want to leave enough time to show you what it looks like to add watercolor. It's okay if you didn't bring watercolor today. You can either keep drawing or you can hang out and watch me add watercolor so you know how to do it in the future. For the article, I actually added the watercolor first. We're not able to do that today because we would have had to wait for the watercolor to dry before drawing on top. But if you try it that way at home, there's one advantage to it. It sometimes looks a little more natural or organic, and it keeps you from wanting to just color in lines. So right now we have these really nice, almost coloring book lines, and the temptation is going to be to just fill it in like a coloring book. And actually, we want to be a little more splashy and spontaneous. So in the future, if you want to try doing the watercolor first, it sometimes helps it look a little more expressive. So you would pick a large brush. This is what I have right now, but if you have a large flat brush, that's also good. And the colors that I'm using are phthalo blue, Prussian blue, and French ultramarine. If you don't have those colors and you just have an assortment of blues, you're gonna want to pick at least one cool blue and one warm blue. So something neat about color theory that I think a lot of people don't know, every color has warm shades and cool shades. So blue is never just blue. If it leans towards green, it's considered cold. If it leans towards red, it's considered warm. So the idea being, let's say you did a monochromatic of all warm blues. The idea is that it creates a certain mood or feeling of warmth. And of course, that there's cultural differences in how we perceive color, but it's kind of just a fun way to think of colors. So we have phthalo blue, which is cold, Prussian blue, which is cold, and French ultramarine, which is warm. And then since we also have some pinyon pine here, I have Hooker's green, which is named after a guy whose last name was Hooker. And then you can mix it with a blue and Hooker's green mixed with a yellow, like yellow ochre. You don't have to worry about color names. The principle here is just a green mixed with a blue and a green mixed with a yellow. And then you can have different browns. I like burnt sienna, which is kind of an orange brown. So I've added water to all my paints. And with watercolor, you need a healthy amount of water. A common thing that people do at first is not using enough water. It should not look anything like acrylic. It should be transparent and it should be able to flow across your page. And we're gonna get really messy here. So first, this is water, just water. And this method of painting is called wet on wet. Don't worry if you pick up some ink. If you have a Micron pen, it's not gonna be much ink that comes out here. Phthalo blue is extremely powerful, so be cautious. Here it comes. And to me, Pinyon Jays have far more than two shades of blue. So I've chosen three, but the principle is just pick different shades of blue and let them mingle on the page. I like to use the Prussian blue around the eyes. It's almost like a dark, oops, that's way too dark. Never fear, you can mop it back up. And I think a lot of people, when they start off with watercolor, they're really cautious, and that's okay, but you will have a better time of it if you are not cautious and you're just a little bit reckless here. Who cares if you mess it up? Nobody's watching, nobody's grading. Let yourself learn about how it flows across the page. And especially with this method of wet on wet, you want things to be flowing and just a little bit beyond your control. If you want, you can come out at the edge here and do some fun brushwork. You can let your brush dry out a little bit and pull out some dry strokes. If you have any frustration about your art, this is a great place to take it out. Just let your brush skip across the page. Okay, let's get in there with some green. I just want to show you here my palette. Look at how wet that is. It's like a soup, a color soup. So don't skimp on the water. If you're working with cakes of color instead of tubes or professional grade paints, you probably need a lot more water to wake them up. And then don't worry about staying inside the lines. Let it flow beyond what you've drawn. Going in with the darker green, green mixed with blue. And then there are some tiny cone, I think those are cones, they're so tiny. So here's some burnt sienna. That's a lot, so I'm gonna take some of it out. If anyone tells you that watercolor is not forgiving, don't believe them. As long as it's wet, you can really easily lift it away. And then even when it's dry, you can often add a little bit of water and rework things. And then at this stage, you don't want to go too far, so you need to let it dry. And you can do your other one here. And this isn't the end. There's one more step after this, but push it over here for a second. Okay, so here we go with just water. And I know some of us have all different kinds of watercolor sets. So if your colors are not doing the same thing, there's a way to make it work. You can let me know in the chat box what you do have, or you can email me later and I can help guide you through it. Ooh, okay, so that's why we do water first, so that it can spread on its own. Oh, that is a lot of phthalo blue, so I'm gonna go back in, take some of that out. Remember not to color inside the lines. It's a wash. In watercolor, you call it a wash. The little Prussian blue around the face. A little bit of French ultramarine. And Pinyon Jay feathers seem to shift in the light. So sometimes they might appear more cyan or more phthalo blue, and other times they appear more ultramarine. I'm going to use a softer burnt umber for the branch instead of orange brown. This is more of a classical, stereotypical brown. Go. So when this image is dry, one thing I might do is go back in and add some hatch marks onto the beak to darken it. And I might also get white gouache, which is a type of opaque watercolor. And since there's snow here, maybe I would add some gouache around the edges or even on the throat. So I'm gonna put this over here to dry. And I have this one completed. So this would be the final step. When your Pinyon Jay is totally dry, you can go in a little more selectively with your colors, and in just a few places, you can add a little more definition. This is the final step. So you're not really worrying about defining things much until now. And you still want to be spare with it and not overdo it because you'll lose the spontaneity of everything you've done up until now. You can come in with a darker green and maybe bring out just a few needles. And you can also invent some new needles in the background here. Oops. Yeah. So if you're using watercolor, I'll give you just a minute or two here to wrap it up or find a good stopping point. And then I'll pull us all together here for the last few minutes or so. So as this one's drying, the green is going up into the Jay's body. If that happened to you, you can still go in and you can mop part of it away pretty easily. And then if you want, you can add a little more blue on top. All right, so I'm gonna pull us back together here. A couple things before we share our art with each other. If you liked this class and the Pinyon Jay article, consider donating to the American Birding Association. I'll send the link to you all in an email. My suggestion when you donate is in the comment section if you like to specify that you would like it to go to the Young Birder programs. I went through a number of the young birder programs and camps as a youth, and they had a huge impact on me. And I know that they are still ongoing to this day. So if you'd like to support their work in that way, I think that would be a wonderful place to donate. Totally worth your money. And when I think about bird conservation and what to do about ongoing bird loss, I think that's probably one of the most powerful things anyone could do is educate and inspire the next generation to love and protect birds.